All right, I think I'm gonna pull up these slides. How have you been?
You know, balancing being a workaholic and self-care.
Yes, yes. I'm sure everyone on this call can echo trying to balance a lot.
And
I hear you. And take care of yourself at the same time.
yes, yes. So I've been starting new habits and doing different things. So meditating and trying different apps and different things like that. That's what you saw my tweet when I was, basically saying I love my AirPods because they have noise cancellation.
Yes.
Yes.
And you know what? I was saying that I have the old version of the AirPods and I lost them so many times that I had to replace them at least 3 times. One, I dropped them on the subway tracks. And at that point, I was so tempted to be like, man, what if I could hop down here and get these AirPods? This is how tired I was of replacing them. And so when I saw your tweet about the new AirPods, I was like, you know what? I'm not getting these AirPods. I've had
Sis, get
before.
them. No, get them.
I know.
Listen,
You're trying to make me a believer.
it's amazing. Like it's a whole nother. So I had the old AirPods too, and then I bought these, and I was like, I don't really see the difference. Like, maybe because they fit in your ear a little better. Until I actually use them on my computer, and the instructions popped up, and it told me like all the features. When I figured it out, I was like, oh, this is why they cost this much.
Yeah. Do any of y'all have AirPods? I'm asking this to the room. New version or old version? While we're waiting for other people to join, since we're at 5:58, have about 2 more minutes and then we'll get started. I know I'm like, okay.
Listen, y'all get these AirPods, okay? Best investment ever. Y'all want to tune out somebody? You don't hear nothing.
So yeah, old school. So I'm still old school too. So I will switch to just my regular. I know it's old, but I feel like the regular headphones, like they just never fail you.
No, that's true. That is true. Because if you can't find them, if it's dead or whatever, that's the go-to. That's the
Yeah,
go-to always.
yeah. So we had somebody on a version 2. Yes, headphones with noise canceling. So I have the big ones. The big noise
Yes.
canceling headphones, like I'm in some studio. Yes, that's definitely a plus. Jeanette. All right, I think we're gonna get started here. Another minute. I'm excited to have you on.
No,
So
we've been talking about this for a while.
yeah, and I've been giving various different workshops on government contracting. A lot of our attendants are from Louisiana, but then a lot are also from all over. And so it's like a mix. And so I always want to bring someone in that brings that more global just feedback around contracts. And I do feel I get a lot of messages and have for years about do small business grants like really exist? So I look forward to, just having that conversation. As we get started here. All right, I think we're gonna go ahead and get going. And Jay is on, she's taking notes for us. So we'll have some great notes.
Perfect.
So welcome everyone. My name is Sevetri Wilson. I'm the founder and CEO of 2 companies, but here today representing Solid Ground Innovations, Strategic Communications and Management Agency. I'm currently supporting SJB Group and DOTD, Department of Transportation, and really providing technical assistance and training through its DBE supportive services. And so something I know Janeya talks a lot about, how can we get certifications and government contracts and all these key things. As we know, the government is one of the largest buyers in the world. And a lot of times small businesses are really trying to figure out, how do we maneuver, right? Like, how do we get started? What's available to us? What's certifications we might be able to use to our advantage? And so I really have been hopefully doing a good job of bringing on a diverse group of individuals to share their knowledge and their background, and really give some key takeaways so that everyone can tomorrow go online and begin to do the work towards getting government contracts. And so with no further ado, I want to introduce Janeya Griffin. And I'll let you give, I feel like I want to hear how you introduced yourself. I feel like I won't do justice, but I've been knowing Janeya for quite a while. We actually met at a conference a few years back, and have followed her work, from work she does with NASA to the work that she has done with helping entrepreneurs secure grants, IP. I mean, you just do so much great work. I just want you to let us know about what you've been up to, but also a little bit of your background.
Yeah, so fun fact, I knew about Sevetri before we actually met. And when I met her, I was like, oh my gosh, you're the girl from the website.
You told me
I was looking, I was actually building out my website. And so when I got my web developer, he was like, send me some examples. And it was her website that I said. She was like, girl, that website is so old. But it was just, very simple, straightforward, to the point, very informative. So that was just a little quick fun fact. But yeah, so my name is Janeya Griffin. I am actually branded as a commercializer across all platforms. And I registered that as a trademark. So initially when I started out, it was just to brand my professional career. And so I am a contractor at NASA. So I do what's called technology transfer. I've been there for the last 9.5 years now. And so what that means is I manage and sell NASA's intellectual property, so their patents. So the government spends $150 billion every year on research and development. And then out of that development come inventions. And so I'll work with the patent attorney, we'll go out, we'll get it patented, and then we'll go out and find commercial companies to actually license the rights to these patents. So I'm in the, boardrooms negotiating deal terms, royalty rates, commercialization plans, looking at, projections and different things like that across the spectrum of like what businesses should be looking for, how they should be, going after VC funding, and, if they actually can or not. But just from a government perspective, because I'm actually evaluating and assessing that company in order for us to license to them. So that's where I got a lot of my a lot of the knowledge, I like to say. And once I found out that the information that I was getting was not something that was very prevalent amongst my community, I was just like, I have to get this information out, because we all have the same access that Apple or a Google or anybody else that has actually licensed technology from a federal laboratory has. And I think we just don't know. So I would go to these conferences and, come to find out, like, nobody knew what tech transfer was. And they'd be like, why is NASA here at a startup conference? Like, this doesn't make sense. The government doesn't want to help startups. But in fact, that's literally what they are wanting to do in terms of building a return on investment, or getting a return on investment for the taxpayer dollars, which is what we are all taxpayers. And so that actually helps our economy. It spurs innovation. And there's so many different just resources outside of just IP that's available, but there's 14,000 pieces of IP across all federal labs. There's over 350 of them that exist, and they all license out their technologies. They license out their facilities to small businesses for them to come and use if they need to test things, their equipment, their subject matter experts. And I think these are just things that we're not particularly used to seeing people like us, actually going through those processes. So So I took that information, I started a consulting company out of it, and then basically just turned it into a business. And so now I help independent inventors. That business is called the Commercializer LLC, but now I help independent inventors and institutions, specifically historically Black college universities, basically monetize their intellectual property. So, what if you have a patent and you don't know how to get it to market? Like, I'm the person that's going to help you build out that roadmap, teach you how to actually, and connect you with patent attorneys, with anybody that you need, manufacturers, anybody that you need that is in that space that's going to help you actually bring it to market. And so I'm really big about intellectual property, obviously advocating for that. I recently in January, I testified to Congress about diversity in patents. And so that really opened up like this big thing about, only 6 Black people actually have patents per million patents, and that's ridiculous. So, my team and I have really been focusing on educating more people about intellectual property, about the rights that they have, about the resources that are available, and the access that they have. And then the other way that I've been, so I'm a serial entrepreneur as well. And so I am a co-founder of a company called Concreates, and we're a creative agency that is powered solely by the incarcerated and formerly incarcerated. So not only am I just working with independent inventors, but I'm also working with like creative IP, so intellectual property from the standpoint of art and design and just creative ideas and strategy. And so I take that same talent or same knowledge, and then I apply it to the business that I have with my co-founders, who are both formerly incarcerated, and we're killing it. So we work with big brands. We bring them radical ideas from radical thinkers, help them think about cultural insights and authentic insights around how they can actually connect to the culture, what they should be doing in their ads that are maybe like not offensive, and different things like that. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
Yes. So Janeya's background is like amazing. I think that what she has built and the work that she's doing continues to definitely impress me. And we definitely have this affinity for government contracting because of so many opportunities for small businesses to really get in, right? So break into government contracting through various routes. And so this conversation today, we're talking with Janeya a lot about grants at the federal level and everything from SBIR to, how do you navigate grants.gov. And then I'll be also talking about business grants as a result of COVID-19 at a local level. And so most municipalities all across the country have set up grant opportunities. And so Janeya, I think we gotta like jump right in. And so we'd love for you to kind of explain the background of America Seed and America Seed Fund, and which is really powered by the SBA. That's something that we constantly talk about, Small Business Association, but I don't think that we know like the layers of what they offer to small businesses. And one of those things that they offer is SBIR funding for businesses. So can you talk a little bit about that and what you have seen in the space?
Yeah. So one thing that I like to say, and I think there was a really good spin on this, because we're supposed to, as a government, they're supposed to be, marketing this to the widest extent possible. So you throw up a website and then you put the information on. But sometimes if nobody sees it, it's really not being useful. So one of the things that I really enjoyed seeing was that there was a way for this topic to actually be inserted into the venture capital conversation when people are out raising funds. And so literally, it's like non-dilutive capital. Literally, that's what we're saying. We take zero equity, right? And so that was a big deal because people are just like, oh my gosh, how much money are you giving me? So SBIR and STTR funding, so small business innovation research grants or small technology transfer research grants. One is for small businesses, one is for small businesses that are actually partnered with universities, right? And so for the SBIR, there's 3 phases. So each phase comes with a certain amount of money and a certain amount of technical expertise as well. So phase one is a little bit under $150,000, or you can get up to that much. And then phase two, and so with phase one, you're doing more of like the research. So let me just back it up a little bit before I doing a deep dive. So the government has set aside $2.2 billion every year to give to small businesses. There are 11 agencies that actually participate in these programs, and they come up with the subtopics, and then those subtopics are pushed out to the industry to basically help them find solutions for problems that the government is experiencing, but maybe they don't know how to get there. And they're also not manufacturers, right? The government is not in the business of manufacturing. And so they're going to pay somebody who is in the business of manufacturing to come up with a product that they can purchase. So really the entire outside of helping small businesses and spurring innovation and different things like that, really the goal is to solve problems that the government is facing, and they want to be very collaborative with industry. And so what you see is there's three phases that happen. So the first phase is like, hey, this is the problem that we're experiencing. We want you to do some research around it. We're going to give you $150,000 to do that research, right? You can build out your team. You don't necessarily have to produce anything like a prototype or anything like that, right? And then phase two is where you actually will produce that prototype. So you've taken the research, you've done the research, you're like, hey, I want to move this into phase two. We're going to give you over $1 million to do this. This is free. You don't have to pay this back. And then you're going to create this prototype off of the research that you're doing, which again is to help us solve a problem that we're experiencing. Then the third phase, and not all of the agencies have phase threes, but the ones that do, that's what we call the commercialization phase. And so with that commercialization phase, the government now is ultimately becoming your client, because they're going to buy the product that you have created, because they are not in the business of manufacturing. And so there are a slew of different options that you can actually go through in terms of like, hey, I have VC funding. I want to match dollars. I want to have those dollars matched. So that, this can go towards the project that we're working on. The really good thing about this as well, because y'all know I'm an advocate for IP, is anything that you come up with or that you create out of utilizing these funds, you get to own that IP. So you get what's called the first right of refusal, or the first right to retain title. And that basically it means that, obviously you still have to pay for like the patent prosecution and different things like that. But if you don't have, let's just say like you don't have any tech and you're not exactly too sure like what to do or where to come up with, you want to work with some subject matter experts and you may not have the capacity to be able to do that, you can partner with the government. They'll pay you to do it, and then you get to own the IP that comes out of that. So I always like to push people towards this route, specifically for that, and then also because like it's non-dilutive funding. So that's with the small businesses. And then with the STTR, it's when a small business will pair with a university, and then they'll go after that grant together.
And it's interesting that you talk about like venture. The companies, I know a few companies who have received the SBIR and the STTR grant. So I'm in New Orleans, maybe 2 out of Baton Rouge, and they actually didn't have any venture capital. So they hadn't even like played in that game. The first money that they were able to get for their company was these grants to help them get their businesses off the ground. And then it was across various different sectors. So someone was in health, another guy was like in legal space. And so I thought that was interesting when I first heard about this, because I had no idea it even existed. Now, can you talk a little bit about the application process?
So with the application, and I know that they've recently changed it. So, and let me just say this. I am by no means like a super duper expert about this. Like I told you, I've been introduced to a lot of the programs and the opportunities that I think we just need to have access to. So please continue to do your research about this. I can connect you with people who have actually sat on the granting boards for these things. And I'm actually working right now with a couple of colleagues on creating a space where we can walk you through what that process looks like. So it used to be like you had to submit like this 30-40 page application proposal, and I think they've dropped it down to where it's like, hey, we want you to submit like 10 slides, and then you submit it, and then if you get in, or if they like what you're doing, then they will ask you to come on and then actually apply. But they're trying to make it a lot easier. One of the main things that I think you need to understand when applying for this is you have to have somebody who has the technical expertise. So even if that somebody isn't you, find somebody who does. So that's why it's always great if you can't go for an SBIR by yourself, that you either put together a team that has that competence, or partner up with the university who does have those type of researchers available. You have to do a commercialization plan. So that's basically a business plan, but it is ultimately focused on the product or the technology at hand, and how you plan on actually bringing it to market. What are you going to do with it afterwards? Why is it important? How big is the market? What is a SWOT? The strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. Really breaking that down, and telling why this is actually the solution to the problem that it is that they're seeking, right? And how bigger can it be outside of just their problem? Because that's where it's really important for the government, because like I said, we want to get a return on investment for taxpayer dollars. And so it has to be something that is maybe dual use or dual purpose. And what that means is you're able to use it in commercial, and you're able to use it in the government. So when we think about like Siri or GPS navigation, like the military has the way like we don't have the same thing as them, but we're still able to use it from a commercial standpoint. So that's dual use. I think, did I answer what was that? Did I answer other questions? Okay.
And so when we think about grants.gov, when I asked you like what were some sites, some references that I should share with those who are here today, you gave me grants.gov. And so how has grants.gov been effective for you? When I go on grants.gov, it's overwhelming.
It is.
It's so much stuff going on. I'm like, what is for me was not for me. And this is why I think so many people are always like, are there really grants out there for small businesses that you don't have to pay back? I think that people think it's like this, and I know I felt like this as a small business owner, like, okay, this was something that was out of reach. Like, where do I find these grants that I don't have to pay back, and where I don't have to give up a percentage of my company? And so can you tell us a little bit about grants.gov and how you have used it?
So for grants.gov, I think I was about to say, like, you just gotta be real patient, right? Because it is very overwhelming. Like, it's so much information on there. One of the things that I have found that has really worked for me is, just being very, very specific about what I'm looking for, and making sure that I'm going through the filters on the left side. So if you go into like search grants, they give you like all these filters that you can like check the boxes for. Mm-hmm. If I know that I'm in the medical field, or I'm in the like educational space, like I'm going to go and I'm going to check Department of Ed, right? Because I know that I could get those grants, and that those grants would be more likely to fit and align with what I'm doing. So really, like, take a second before you go on the website and actually write down like what are the specifics and who would you actually go to. So it's almost like doing a bit of customer discovery, but the government is your customer, right? And so if you're all agencies, I think there's 14 agencies on grants.gov, like which one of those would your product or your service best fall under? And if you are like professional services, sometimes it falls under all of them, depending on exactly what you're trying to do. And so I would, write out a list of like, okay, hey, I know that, I have this let's just say a medical bracelet or something like that, and I want to go to Health and Human Services. I want to look at maybe even NSF, right? Health, maybe for like health disparities. So NSF is the National Science Foundation. They have a lot of programs, or a lot of, yeah, they have a lot of grants and funding that is really geared towards inclusion within underserved communities and different things like that. So if you're looking at health disparities within that area, that might be good. But the Health and Human Services is also good as well. NIH, National Institute of Health. These are all, places where I think that if I have, a health background, or if I'm in that space, that those would be my targets. And then I would just click on it and see like, okay, what grants do they have there? And then they also, be very specific on what you want and check off all those boxes so that it brings down the overwhelmingness, because like they'll give you like 15,000 grants to go through and you're like, I'm not going to go through all of them. The other thing that I do is I really do look at, how I can how I can easily like transfer what I'm doing into maybe like something else. So taking the functionality of what I'm doing, like I said, like if I'm in education and how that might go through all of them, that might be easier to do that. And then to put that search term in there, to just say like education services or something like that, and then all those keywords will pop up. Also, when you're doing searches, they have, the normal Boolean search. Even if you put it in Google, if you put the quotations marks around it, it's looking specifically for those words and those words only. So it's gonna, kick back some of that information based on those keywords. So I would just try to go on with a plan, honestly, because that's really going to be the only thing that it's unfortunate, but it is something that it is overwhelming. And so we gotta keep it real, right?
Yes. And I mean, but they do exist. There's, as Janeya said, there are billions of dollars worth of grants across all these different agencies that they are giving out. And so I do feel that it is about like understanding how to maneuver, having patience, and looking for those opportunities in the space that you're looking to do business. And I mean, you did point out something that's so important. It's kind of like write down who you want to target. And I brought another guest on earlier this year, Zamara. She's in government contracting as well. And one thing that she says that people make a mistake is because they try to go after all the agencies, right? Instead of building a rapport and understanding like how a few agencies work and they can connect to. And so there's literally something for everyone. And I know we have been in, Department of Transportation. We worked in with the DoD, Department of Defense, and originally, even with the Department of Defense, the opportunity kind of came down our way because we were working adjacent to another agency that was working with DoD, and so I think opportunities can definitely be. They can come out of the blue, but when you're in play and people kind of know you are in play, then it could be a lot easier for people to find you and agencies to find you. But going back to thousands of grants, right? So thousands of grants trying to cycle them, really being able to like bring it in, being able to really hone in on like, what are you doing specifically? What are you selling? Very specific, and narrow those grants down. I know we have a few questions. We'll be getting to them in probably about 10 minutes. And so hopefully we'll be able to utilize those questions to go a little bit deeper in Q&A time.
And the other thing before you move on, there's go to all of these like government websites and get on their listserv. So grants.gov actually has a listserv that you can get on, and they'll send grants to your inbox, and you can kind of just check which ones like you want or you don't want, right? So think about getting on listservs, because then you'll be the first to know when, specific type of grants come out.
Yeah. And so I want to talk a little bit quickly before we jump into Q&A about, if you're in Louisiana, some local grants that are a lot easier probably to get than these much larger, more lucrative federal grants. But if you are in Louisiana, a couple websites that you want to check out are urbanleaguela.org, Restart EBR, Louisiana Main Street, and then NOLA BA. And so the state of Louisiana had about $275 million in grant funds that had been obligated. Now, as of September 30th, they had given the first few phases of that funding to small businesses. And so if you go to their website, you're going to see that. However, there is a new phase that we should be entering pretty soon that will open back up. I think that a lot of us, particularly those who are doing business, have learned the pros and cons, how to give out money better, what requirements we probably need and criteria we probably need to give a little bit on. And so over the course of the next few weeks, a month or two, you will be seeing this program reopen. And so I do think that that's something to stay abreast on, and to go to the Louisiana Department of Treasury to sign up. And so a lot of the things that, you're signing up for, you're like, okay, so a lot of this might be junk mail, but there are a few websites that it does make sense for you to sign up. And so if you have received money from Louisiana through this Louisiana Small Business Grant, feel free to drop a comment saying how it may have been for you. So maybe you can help other small businesses who are in Louisiana and they're trying to secure these grants, which are essentially about $15,000. So definitely not as large as the $100,000 million grants on the federal side. But when you're trying to get up and going, when you're facing a lot of the hurdles that we have faced this year, is definitely something. Locally, I mentioned Resilient Restart EBR. And here, these are small business micro grants. So in this program, which is actively funding small businesses. So if you're in East Baton Rouge Parish, you can apply for this grant, which is a micro grant of $2,500, but the application process is very easy. And so some people might say, oh, what's $2,500 going to do for me? But it can get you a lot of things that you might be needing that can help you right in your small business. So I always think that if people are giving away free money, that you don't have to repay grants and you qualify, and the barrier to enter to actually apply is low, you definitely should do that. And so that's Resilient Restart EBR. The third one I'll talk about, and I have one more, but it's actually on the Treasury page for Lake Charles, but New Orleans NOLA BA. And so New Orleans NOLA BA is also giving out grants to small businesses. You can go to nolaba.org and access this information and see the types of grants they're giving. And so they're giving across various different criteria. So you can be a small business and get grant access. They partner with Ganoff, the city of New Orleans, and others. You can be working in a gig economy. They have grants for a gig economy. They have grants for artists. And so if you haven't had opportunity to access these grants, whether that be from the state level or the local level, you should definitely do so. If you're in Lake Charles or Shreveport, going back, as I mentioned, to the state of Louisiana's website, they actually have linked the websites for those other cities who also have set up some type of grants for small businesses. And so I do feel that we're in the first round of funding to really stimulate the economy for small businesses. We've seen that come. And I think that we most likely will see another round of funding come for small businesses to really keep us moving and afloat during this difficult 2020. And then as we gotta look forward to 2021. And so I want to kind of use the last bit of this time to answer your questions. And so I'll exit really quickly. I'll stop sharing my screen and look at some of the questions that you all might have for us. And so if you haven't, please feel free to drop questions in the Q&A. I know some of you have also dropped some in the chat as well. And so one question was, what does this mean? Let's see, what does this mean for a tech and design agency? It's been tough finding grants that are a good match. And so this goes back to the conversation from the federal side. So tech and design in agencies.
Wait, can you ask that again? You were breaking up a little bit.
Sorry about that. So what does this mean? And she's speaking of the SBIR, STTR grants, I'm thinking. What does this mean for a tech and design agency? It's been tough finding grants that are a good match. But I think this person would be someone that would most likely qualify for an SBIR grant. But what are your thoughts there?
So with folks who are going after SBIRs, it's more so around research, right? And so, I'll give you an example. There was a company called Patent Dive, and they're in Louisiana, out in New Orleans, and they partnered up with, I want to say it was at Xavier, and they got an SBIR or STTR, right? And so there was around it's around the legal space. So they literally developed a software that now anybody can use to, automate the patenting process. And so really it just depends on what you're doing, and can you do research that would move your industry forward, or have some sort of software component or solution that will come out of it. Obviously, that would also be, a solution to whatever problem the government was facing. This one was funded through the NSF, so it's more so around NSF includes and different things like that. And how do you increase, like, small business owners? How do you help micro entities and different things like that? But if you're in the tech and design space, then maybe you can come up with, maybe there's better processes, right? In terms of like compliance for companies that are working with the government. Maybe there are tools that you can come up with, but you have to do the research in order to figure out, like, okay, well, what would be the best tool in order to solve this type of problem? If there is maybe like so recently there was a RFI, request for information, put out by the government saying that, hey, like there's this act called the Bayh-Dole Act. And that's what I was telling you guys about, is where industry or any nonprofit or small business actually gets to retain title to the patents or the IP that come out of federally funded research. And they're basically saying like, hey, we don't have a lot of people who are compliant in this. So they get the money and then they don't report out the inventions or the developments that they're coming up with. So that's a problem that the government is having, because they still have to do those reports, whether or not that small business chooses to retain the title or not. And so now they're like, hey, we're losing out because there are technologies that we could be using, but we don't know if we have the rights to them or not. So that would be the perfect opportunity for a tech and design company to come in and say like, hey, it's okay, I'll develop a platform for you and I'll automate that process. Boom, done, right? So I think you just have to really understand what the problem is, and then figure out how you can innovatively solve it with the skill set that you have.
No, that's great. And so I saw a few questions related to new companies. And so if you're a new company, meaning that maybe you existed only for a year or 6-7 months, can you still apply for grants, or is there like a minimum time that you have had to be in existence?
No, I don't think that there's a minimum time. I think what they will ask you, because you have to, and this is one thing that I think people they forget or they just don't know. Like, it's not just like, hey, here's my company, I want to get the grant. Like, you actually have to go into the system, become certified, right? You got to get into the SAM system, which is the system for award management. You have to have a DUNS number. You have to have a cage code. You have to have all of these things lined up so that the government can basically verify and validate that you are a legitimate company and that these are the products and the services that you would be able to offer. And so if you're working as a sole proprietor, I think sometimes it might still be okay, but you still have to have like an EIN and different things like that. But as long as you're registered with like your state or whoever that may be, then you'll be okay. But you have to go through that process of actually being able and getting ready to do work with the government first before you can then start actually applying for these grants and receiving them, because that's the information that they're going to ask for. So regardless if you just starting out, or if you've been in work for years, I think there is no time limit. Now what they are going to ask for is, hey, what's your tax return, or different things like that. If you haven't filed taxes because you're so new, then you just basically tell them that.
Yeah, and someone mentioned, Brittany, that the SAMS and Cage code can take up to 4 to 6 weeks of processing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why it's so important to stay ready.
Yep.
Because I can't tell you how many times I know that businesses, including myself, have missed opportunities because we didn't have our ducks in a row. And the opportunity was right there, but it was like, you can't even apply without some of these things. And yes, it does take a few weeks to get it. And so if you see something, someone brings you something and it's like, oh, it's due in 2 weeks, and you're not there yet, it's like, you missed the opportunity. And it really doesn't cost you anything to go ahead and get registered, get certified. Someone said that happened to them too. It doesn't cost you anything. Yes, it takes you time, but just note that we're here right now as a partnership through BJ, and they'll actually help small businesses get certified, get these certifications, register. And then in addition to that, your economic development offices have small business programs. So someone said they were in, I saw Louisiana definitely representing in here, but Georgia, someone from Georgia. You can go and find the same information that I listed for Louisiana on the Georgia State website. Go to small business initiatives, and the information that you need is there. Also, SCORE, right? And so we talk about the SBA. SBA also has additional programs and so on to help small businesses for free. So they'll walk you through the steps that you need to go through and literally hold your hand until you have received all of these key things. And Kenyatta dropped his information, the DBE supportive services for SJB in the chat. And so, yeah, definitely don't think you have to do all this alone, because there are so many resources that are available through taxpayer dollars that will support small businesses. Yes. And so
the other thing too is I'm sorry, there's a little bit of a delay. The other thing too is that, hey, even if you don't have it, but you know that there's some opportunities, find somebody that you can partner up with that does have it. Because we've applied for plenty of hey, I know you, I want to bring you on, this is your value add, because I know that you're already registered with the government, and plus you might do, work in this space, but collaborate and gather up. There are, I don't see this enough, of people that look like us that are going after these huge contracts. I mean, millions of dollar contracts. And there's 10 companies on the one contract, and they're all small businesses. And that's why they won, because they had somebody who was Black owned, somebody was a veteran, somebody who was all of this, all on these contracts. And we need to start doing more of that. So
yeah, I do feel like that's going to put even more so, people are going to be at an advantage as people look for minority suppliers, DBEs, women, all these different diverse contractors, being able to partner and bring those individuals on your team. I know people have looked for me for those things, right? Because I had a specific certification that they no longer could get, or an 8A certification, which is a certification. And so you think about those things. I think that is important. And so the next question is, what are some required recommended documents or materials when applying for grants? And so if there's any recommended materials.
Obviously just have, I like to call it a mission control. And I have all of my very important, I have my DUNS number, I have my cage code, I have my capabilities statement, I have what my NAICS codes are. And so those are very important, especially, or what my products codes are, because that's what you're going to need in order to fill out all of that information. So when you have all of these documents ready, easily available and kind of just in one place, that obviously, puts you at a much easier, it makes the process a lot easier. The other thing that I would get together is a budget, like a budget calculator, right? So find some form of format or something, or maybe something that you may have used in the past, but you can probably look up like templates or different things like that. So when you are applying for a grant, it gives you like step-by-step instructions in the announcement. It'll tell you like, hey, use 12-point font, use this type of and this type of font. And so I think it's really important that we pay attention to that. So in terms of like, outside of like the business documents, go through it in the beginning and then just organize everything. Write down all of the specifics, all the very important information that is going to make or break if you get, approved or not. Because just those small things, if it's not in the same formatting as, what they've asked, if it's 10 pages and they only ask for 9, they throwing you out. So all of these things are very important. So really just go have that checklist of things and make sure that you are doing it step by step, just how they showed you how.
One question was, I see Patricia, you have your hand up, so I will invite you up here in a second. But I may be reading this wrong, but they said curious about BAA announcements and who's on the list to focus on.
Oh, was that for me or for someone else?
Yeah, no, for you.
Oh, okay, perfect. So broad agency announcements, or BAAs, are basically the announcements that go out to say like, hey, we are requesting proposals for certain areas. One of the main ones that I really focus on are from MBDA, the Minority Business Development Agency, and then the Economic Development Agency as well. So, or EDA, because a lot of the things that they are looking for, and for me, right, is because I want to focus on building up small businesses. I want to focus on providing opportunities for underserved communities. And so these are areas that they play in. There's the FAST grant. There's small business development centers actually come from SBA. So SBA puts out all of these grants as well in terms of like, hey, how can you continue to help out small businesses? How can you continue to spur innovation? Sometimes they want to focus on STEM. So STEM is really a big thing specifically for diversity, because they see that there is a disparity in that. And so they want to close that gap. So what are ways that you could be, utilizing that or in that space, just with what you do, just make it unique to what you do, right? So if they're that tech and design company, the lady that had the question about that, like, what can you do in tech and design that's going to help spur innovation, or what's going to help, decrease that gap for the disparity in STEM students of color, or, whatever that might look like.
So I have a good question that I know you'll probably like, but to that point, in New Orleans, a previous client of mine, STEM NOLA, they actually just received a $3 million 3-year award from the DoD. And so essentially they're paying them to bring STEM education to camp on bases of military families.
Nice.
And so it's so many, you know what I mean? Like, there's something for what you love to do. You just have to figure out how you maneuver and how you sell it to the government, right?
Yep.
And so a question here is, how do I approach universities for partnerships?
Okay. So first off, you got to do your homework, right? You have to understand what are the capabilities that university provides. What's the research? What's the type of research that they are doing at that university? You don't want to go to a liberal arts university and ask them like, where's your STEM college, or where's your, and you're just like, yeah, that's not what we do, right? So customer discovery, right? So do that research first. Find out like, who are those schools or those universities that like have patents in the space that you want to get into, or are really focusing on research in those areas. Little, cool fact, Google actually started at Stanford, but it was funded through government dollars. They got government grants to actually do research on the algorithm that is now Google. And so, that's because Stanford actually was working within that industry already around, creating algorithms and different things like that. And so, you know where to go, right? And so if it's cybersecurity, if it's engineering, you can go to Prairie View A&M. If it's or North Carolina A&T, I'm HBCU, so I'm going to be throwing out all these HBCUs all the time. But yeah, find out what programs exist at these universities and then reach out to those professors or that faculty to find out, like, hey, because those are going to be the people that you're going to partner up with. They are going to be the ones who are either going to be your what we call not private investigators, principal investigators. And so if you're a principal investigator and they're a principal investigator, they're going to be the one that maybe has that credibility in, that research space, if that's who you're trying to partner up with. Look at, what type of facilities they have or equipment or just capabilities. And you can find most capability statements of universities on their websites.
Yeah, and don't forget about community colleges, because
Oh, yes.
had a good friend who owned a mechanic shop, and he actually partnered with a community college to bring mechanics to that community college, to teach students there how to get good paying jobs as like mechanics and at automotive, inside of automotive departments, et cetera. And so when you think about someone who said they were in the trucking business, I was just in Mississippi pre-COVID, and there was a trucking company that actually got a large grant from Oxfam to start a school for women truckers, because there is a gap in women. There's very few women who are in trucking, but when you think about the salaries they can make, right, 6-figure salaries, they can determine their own schedules, et cetera. They gave them a grant to actually start a school to teach trucking and to teach the business of trucking to women specifically. And so, yeah, you definitely have to get strategic and start targeting a lot of people. So we have about another 10 minutes. We definitely have more questions coming in. And so one of the questions, let's see if I go back here. I have a prototype and I'm looking to get a mold made. Are there any grants for startups? So I think that goes back to SBIR, because they'll give you money for research, right? And so research, then prototyping, et cetera. But anything else you want to add there?
Yeah. So one thing I'll say is so sometimes we already have the solution. It's already created. And then the government puts out, the subtopic, and they're asking for research to be done around it. And what they're not looking for, in a phase 1 for you to already have the product done, right? But you do already, let's just say hypothetically. So like I would still apply for that and then do research. And then you already have phase 2. So continue to refine it, continue to test against it, because when you're testing, that's research, right? And so really start to look at things from that standpoint and don't count yourself out of that equation.
Yeah, and someone asked a question about, can a Delaware form but Louisiana operating company qualify for Louisiana state grant funding? Yes. I'm actually, my other company, Resilia, is a Delaware core, but we operate in Louisiana. So the answer to that is pretty simple. Yes, you can. One question is, are all grants given first priority to minorities?
So there are, I want to say there are, I can't think of the number, but it's if you are minority owned, woman owned, veteran owned, disabled, economic and socially disadvantaged. Am I missing one? Or is there 5? Is that 5?
That's 5. You got 5 fingers up at least.
Yeah, I think those are what they focus on. And so what they have are called set asides, right? And so there's a certain amount of money, a certain amount of funds that have to go out to people who fall under these categories or who have these certifications. So it's really important that you look into getting these certifications so that you can basically have your own bucket to pull from in terms of getting grants and contracts.
Thank you. So do you know someone that has Cage Code, has their SAM done, and they're looking to actually apply for grants? Are there people out there that will help with grant applications?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's so many. I have a couple. If they want to email me, I can send them an introduction. But yeah, there are so many different like grant writers. This is all they do, right? They know the process. They know how to go through that. There are companies that also help you with these certifications as well. I think somebody had dropped something in the chat about that.
Yeah.
So check that as well. But yeah, there are, like, if there's something that you're not good at or you don't know how, trust me, there's a freelancer who can do it.
Yeah. And do you know anyone who assists with helping to, yep, same thing. So someone asked a question related to that of like, do you know anyone who assists with helping to submit competitive proposals? Yes, definitely. And so in a follow-up, we'll send a follow-up with this recording with the actual slides, and we'll add any additional information. I'll include Janeya's information as well in that email. But there's definitely people who are out here helping put together these type of proposals, helping you apply for grants. And that's, again, it's all about like knowing what's available to you, knowing who is available to you, and getting that information, right? Because that's how I kind of figured out government contracting, but definitely learning from a lot of people that knew a lot more than I did, and learning ways to get better at it. Let's see if I have anything else here. I see Jay is typing something. Oh, capability statements. So someone asked, where can I find help with setting up capability statements? And so I'm happy to actually share a link to my capability statement that I use in government contracting. But Janeya, are there any other places where people can find out more about capability statements?
So yes, so I want to say, because they just changed the name of it, I want to say it is beta, it might be beta.sam.gov now. But let me follow back up with what that link is. So this is a trick that you should do. Find a company that has already received a government contract or government grant, because all of this is public information. And then you go and you look at their capability statements, you look at their NAICS codes, you look at their products codes, and that's how you build out your own. Like, that's literally how I built mine out. Is I found a company where I knew where I wanted to be in terms of like getting certain types of contracts and different things like that. And I looked at their capability statement because it's all published.
Yes. So Kenyatta just dropped something in the message. Again, Kenyatta is my partner in bringing these webinars to you all for free. And he said that reach out to him and they help you create and build your capability statements for free. So ping him and he'll help out with that. And again, I'll also attach my real life capability statement for those who are looking to just see how one might look. Let's see, someone asked, this might be like the last question, but Janeya, could you also repeat the mission control resources the company should have and are included in follow-up?
Oh yeah, so mission control is basically all of the pertinent information. So you're gonna need your EIN, your tax ID, you're gonna need your cage code, you're gonna need your DUNS number, your capability statement, your products numbers, your NAICS codes, NAICS. I forget what that stands for. It's a really long acronym. It's an acronym for a really long thing. Your NAICS codes. And I think that is pretty much it in terms of like, you know, what you're going to instantly need. Outside of that, when you are building out, you know, if you are submitting for an actual grant, you want to go through and you want to pull out what all of the instructions are. Like, okay, you're going to need, if it's 10 pages, you're going to need 10 pages. Put that down. What size font? What type of font? What's the margin? How do the margins need to be formatted? So all of that can be in one area, especially if you're going to be hiring someone else to do the grant for you, or working with a team of folks who are all putting together a grant. Maybe y'all are rushing and people got to put everything together. At least they can have a place or a space where they know that they can go to kind of just get a quick, look at that.
Absolutely. And I'll just answer this last question. Someone asked, do you have any examples of people getting grants with HUD for housing innovations? So particularly if you live in Louisiana, there's a lot of opportunity with HUD, or at least there used to be, but I'll actually, in the follow-up email, I'll link something back to a good colleague and friend of mine, Anthony Kimball, who they have been able to access some HUB grant opportunities for developments in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. But he also works with some guys out of Pittsburgh, has done some things in New Orleans. And so he has some information that I know he has shared with the public around that when it comes to housing. But so I think we're at the end of this webinar. We really thank everyone for joining us. Janeya, any final words? You finally had your actual name also underneath your face.
See that? I just went into the calendar invite and clicked, and it said, don't share it. This is a very unique link. So I'm like, okay, but I didn't realize until Emil got on. And I seen Emil. I'm like, wait a minute, how he got my name?
Yes. He's up here with us. But any final words, Janeya? And thank you again for joining us tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. I think just don't think that it's not attainable, or that like they don't exist or anything like that. There's probably somebody out there that actually has gone through it. And find them, ask them, reach out, ask questions like, hey, how did you get this grant? Was the process difficult? People are really open and willing to share, especially when it's free money, because you don't necessarily got to compete like that, right? I mean, you do, but it's not like they've already gotten their grant. So,
right.
And so, reach out to folks, ask them. The other thing that's really important is really building relationships with like the program managers, or anybody who is actually in control of like budgets and dollars, because like they're going to know that, hey, like there's something that I think you would definitely be in alignment with, and they're going to send it to you. And so, or send it to you first, right? Or make sure that you're included on that listserv where you can get additional information. Obviously, they're not going to like, do anything that's illegal or anything like that, but they'll keep you in the know about what's going on, and then you can ask questions and different things like that. So build those relationships. Those are really, really important.
Absolutely. Yeah. Like if you stay just like resilient when it comes to staying in touch with people, like people will let you in, they'll show you, they might let you take copies of it or bring it home, but they'll show you the secret sauce so you can do it on your own, which is happening for me. But I want to wrap up this conversation. And before I do, I want to say our next webinar is actually a week from tonight on Thursday. And I'm actually bringing Kenyatta back. Kenyatta's getting a lot of action right now in the chat related to the capability statements and like applying. But I'm actually bringing Kenyatta Sparks back next Thursday alongside myself to talk about just the basics, right? So getting back to the basics, a lot of things that Janeya said, like you need to have this, you need to have that, you need to have, capability statement. We're going to talk about all of that on next Thursday. And so we're going to just walk you through all the key things that you need to have, how to get certified for, say, DBE, and more. So thank you all again for joining. Thank you, Janeya, Jay, for helping, and Emil. I don't know how you got up here, but hi, how you doing? And look forward to seeing you all next Thursday. Thanks, everyone.
Awesome. Thanks for having me. This was great.
Yeah. Bye, everyone.